All right. We're going to talk about the ways to import data. We've done some stuff with the data in terms of when you have a data set already. When you have a data set already, you can do a number of things with it, obviously. But the first thing we have to do is now when we get data, we have to get it into the computer or into the database. So what I'm going to do is I opened up the file over here already. One of the challenges that you have in terms of importing data is you really hope that it's clean. And that hope gets destroyed almost immediately because it just never works out well. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done with it. Now, what I'm going to do is when I take a look at this table, we need to generally create a table. I'm going to go through two different things, and one of them I'm having a problem with on my computer, but I'm going to go through all the sequence of steps, and then I'm going to have you guys do the same thing and try and run them. For some of you, it might work without an issue. Others, it might not. I'll have to try and help you debug those, as I can also do mine. Again, and it's slightly different on the Mac and the PC. This is a little bit less having to do with SQL as it does utilizing the database itself, the database application. Now, here we have this table. The first thing, or we have a CSV file. All of the fields are separated by commas, and the first row at the top are the column headers. You can see that the first column is 3 characters, the next column is 4 digits, the next column is roughly 5 digits, next column is 5 digits, and then the remaining 11 columns are decimal. Now, what we probably want to do is create a table first. You guys can't see my screen, can you?
Oh, we can.
No, you can see the you saw the
workbench
database, but you can't see the CSV file, right?
No, not that.
Yeah, okay. Hold on, I'm going to stop share. I got to redo this again. Okay. So this is what I was referring to. The first row is the column headers. Then you have the first column as basically being 3 letters. The next column being 4 digits, then 5 digits, 5 digits, and the rest are decimals. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create a table that actually has this format. So what I'm going to do here is in my schema, I've actually created a table, but I'm going to do it again. We're going to basically do something like this. We're going to create a table. And like we said, the first column that we have is going to be the airport code. And I can call it whatever I want, doesn't matter. But now, from the first session that we had, we saw that there were different ways to figure out the different types of fields. So here, I'm going to use varchar, and since I'm almost certain, or pretty certain, that all of them are 3 digits, I'm going to just basically make them 3 digits. Now, remember that the columns here set up are, this is the primary key, so that means that this would be unique. Since looking at the data itself here, ABQ, there are multiple ones, it obviously cannot be a primary key, so it would give us a problem. Okay. I just showed the screen of the file, and which you didn't see because I'm only sharing one screen at a time. And basically it had multiple ABQs for Albuquerque. So that's why primary key needs to be turned off. Not null. This is something that I can either keep or not, whether I could say that it cannot be null or it could be null. Most cases you want it not null for any type of somewhat of an identifier, but it won't matter. UQ means it's unique, but it doesn't have to be a key. Okay, so that means there's not going to be an index created on it. We'll talk about indexes probably next week. Bin is a binary, whether it's a binary field or not, so it'll save space. You don't need that. And all of these items, by the way, are down here on the right side. So you can see that the next one, UN, is basically unsigned. Whether or not, if you have an integer, it can be unsigned. The reason why you would have signed or unsigned is if you have a signed integer, it can go from the negative numbers to the positive numbers, which means the size of the number that you can have is going to be smaller because it has to account for both sides of 0. If it's unsigned, you can basically have only positive numbers, and it can store a lot more. That's where when you get into the storage issue of the database. Zero fill will basically fill in zeros for certain characters. AI is auto increment. If we create an ID that we want to automatically increment for every record, it will do it automatically. And then G is generated, and this is new, and I'm actually not sure what that one does, but I don't think we're going to need it. Now, we had said that there were other columns as well. So the next column was the year. Now, we have a choice. The year is 4 digits, so I could make this an integer. I could also make it a varchar, or I can make it an integer. I can make it a character. The next one, hold on, guys, sorry. All right, sorry about that. All right, so now you have departures, which was the next column. But this is probably going to be an integer. And this is an integer. And I think the next one was arrivals. I'm sorry, guys. Hold on a second. Okay, so now we have arrivals. I'll make this an integer as well. Okay, and so forth. Now, what I'm going to do is, when you click apply, it'll create the table. There's more fields, but I've already done this, so I don't want to waste too much time. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to show you what I created for this. What I created here was, I did integer 11, integer 11. These are just integers. This should have been an integer too. The other ones are going to be decimal 6-4. I want 4 decimals, 4 decimal places to the right. Now, these are pretty much just estimates. In other words, I looked at the table or at the data. So let me just show you what the data looks like again. And it looks like everything is going to be 4 decimal places, and this looks like it's 2. So technically, I'm going to play around with this. When I import it in, if I end up with any warnings on those fields, I'll expand the field out. I may expand it to 10 digits with 6 decimal places on the right side. So I could do any number of those things that I want. Technically, you've got to figure out by looking at the data which ones are appropriate. So let me go back to Workbench. Okay.
A question: would it zero pad places where you just have 2 decimals in the data?
Say again?
Would it zero pad 2 additional zeros?
To the right?
Yeah.
No. No, it doesn't zero pad those to the right.
Okay.
Okay. And nor should you really wouldn't want it to anyway. And the
Right.
reason you don't want it to is because you don't want to waste space.
Right.
Okay. Now, you're going to notice that I labeled them var 5, var 6, var 7, var 8, var 9, 10, 11, 12. It gets really tedious to try and figure out what all these fields are, and sometimes I just want to import them quickly. So I import them like this, and then I change the names of the columns after. You don't have to do it up front. But technically, you might want to have the right names in the columns in order to do that. Now, I'm going to click Apply because I had to change the column. When you've got the database, now we have to import it. Now I'm going to show you two ways to import it. The first way is my preferred way, but I'm having a problem on my system. And it's this. It's called the load data in file. And there are two versions of this. There's load data in file and load data local in file. Depending on the version of MySQL you have will determine whether or not you can or cannot use the local option. I am not able to use the local option because I'm on MySQL 8. On the MySQL 5, you can use local. What it means is that it's using technically the workbench itself to load the file. That's the load data local, because you have to imagine your workbench is on one computer and the server is on another computer. That's usually what it is. So when you're using local, it's using wherever workbench is. If you don't use the word local, it's using wherever the server is located. Now, the problem is when they're on the same machine, it gets a little bit fuzzy to try and figure out which is which, because it is the same machine. So suffice it to say, you need to find the right directory where this will load. Now, part of the problem I have here on the Mac is I've got to figure out exactly where this is coming from. And technically, when I ran this, it's actually showing me that I should be on this user local MySQL data. However, unfortunately, that did not work. I had to do something else to get the data in. But I want to show you the command first. For some of you, it will work right away. For others, it will not, and I'll try and get yours to work separately or independently. So here's the format. There's going to be this load data in file or load data local in file, okay? That's the first part to this. So I'm going to take out the, you know what, I'm going to put the local in brackets like this. So it depends on what you have. This is the name and location of the file on your computer or on the server. So if you did have a separate server and you were connected to it and you do load data in file, you would have to put the right path where that was located. And in some cases, it's going to be on a set directory. You won't have a choice. If I wanted to here, and if it worked, I could do something like this. I could do desktop, and it should get it from my local computer. Now, once it knows where the file is, I need to insert it into a table. So I'm inserting it into this thing called new table. Now, what's going to happen is that if I have the 15 fields, I need to have 15 fields in my CSV, otherwise I'm going to run into problems. So you have to have the same number of fields, which is why I created the new table first. Now this next line is fields terminated by. If you have a comma separated file, this will be a comma. If you have a, let's say, a pipe separated file, you will have a pipe in between it. If you have a colon separated file, that means the fields are separated by colons, you might have something like that, a colon. Okay, most of them will be commas. Sometimes you'll have a tab separated file, which means you will do something that looks like that with a tab. Okay. Does that make sense so far? Okay. Now the lines terminated by \n. There are going to be three options here: \n, \r, or \r\n. Individual keys like this. One of them is a Unix carriage return, which is the R. The Windows is usually a \n, and the \r\n is, I think, the Mac. Now, this usually confuses me because I never know what it's saved as. You may think you know what it's loaded as, but you don't. Sometimes I'll end up trying the \n or the \r, depending on what saves. if you look at the text wrangler, I'm going to go back to text wrangler just to show you. This is my file. When I do a file save as, you will see at the bottom, the line breaks can be windows, carriage return line feed. That's the \n. The Unix is the line feed. That's the \r. And the classic Mac is the \n /r/n. So there are 3 different formats. My recommendation is if you save it on a Mac, save it as a Windows CSV file or a DOS CSV file, because you'll never go wrong with it. With the others, you could end up with issues. But that's the way this is encoded, and that's how you can tell the difference. This one is Windows. Okay. Back to my workbench. Okay, now, and then finally, I have ignore one lines. Notice the S at the end. You can ignore the first number of lines, and usually you do that for the headers because I don't need the headers. Sometimes you have extra spaces at the top of the at the top of the file, and you can ignore those because sometimes they're comments. You can ignore them completely. When you do that, you should be able to run this. This will not run on mine. It'll give me an error. And that's because it's telling me for this, you should use local, and then it'll give me another error. Oops, I can't do this here, sorry. And the problem I have here is that this local is not allowed in this version. If I do load data local in file, it says I cannot get stat of this. And the problem with the stat of that means I cannot find the file. However, I was able to run it before. Part of what you have is this. These items are in this configuration file. If you go into administration and you go to your system variables, you will see this thing called secure file privilege. This needs to have the value of the directory that you want to load files from. And this is where I'm having an issue, because there is a configuration file that will allow me to do it, and it's not accepting it for some reason. If you go to, where was I? Options file, security, you'll see this here. I tried to set it to the user's Alex Bly's desktop, and for some reason, and this is the actual file on my computer, /etsy my.cnf. For some reason, it is not accepting it, and to be honest, I don't know why. So I've got to figure out why it's not accepting it at all. It should, and it's just not. So I must be missing something else in this setting. However, once you do that and you get it to work, I was able to do it on the server itself. If I do my select rows, you'll see that I have all the data published in this field. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Hey, Vihan, actually, when I did the 4, it is populating the extra zeros.
Okay.
I'm not really sure why it's doing that, to be honest with you, because I didn't think it was. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that so far? I'm going to show you another way to import the data. Okay. If you go to your table, once you've created it, you have this thing called Table Data Import Wizard. You basically click on that and you go into your import. We're going to find that file. I don't remember what the hell the damn thing is called.
Airports.
There we go. And I click next. And I'm going to use existing table. I want it to go into this table. Truncate table before import. Now the truncate means to get rid of all of the data. I'm going to show you that also before we go today. Just someone remind me. I'm going to show you how we'll delete records very quickly. So I click next. And it has all of the files. And basically it says, okay, here's your source column, which is in the file. It's called airport, year, departures for metric. And it's saying, okay, this is where we want it to go. Now, the problem with this tool is you've got to expand it a little bit so that you can figure out where you want it to go. And the real challenge is when you have a very large table, this is a problem because you can't see it all very easily. But if you can stomach it, then you're okay. You can change the format up here. So in this case, the line separator is the line feed. Field separator is the comma. And then the enclosed strings.
Hi.
Yep.
Are we supposed to be looking at the data file or your your work.
Okay, you know what? Hold on. It opened up a new window. That's why you can't see it. Hold on. Sorry about that. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. Let me go back and do that again.
Okay.
Okay. Close this. Okay. You go to Table Data Import Wizard, and this is the file that I'm using. You can still see the screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. Next, use existing table, airport.new table. Then I'm going to put truncate table before import. Again, truncate means I'm going to delete all the records that are in there. Okay. Click next. As you can see here, this is the source column of the file. This is the destination column in my database. Now, like I said, it was a little bit difficult because I'm trying to move this. You have to actually expand the window slightly and then drag this so that you can see all of them, so it's a little bit kludgy. If you've got a ton of fields, obviously this could be problematic, but this is another way to import the data. If you click on the little wrench up here, you'll see that it gives you the options for the file format that you're importing. This is your line feed. Again, this is what I showed in the text wrangler. LF line feed, carriage return, CRLF. Okay. The field separator is a comma. This enclosed strings is also important because if you have commas within a field, the field needs to be encapsulated with quotes. Otherwise, it will think that that comma is actually part the next field. So let me just show you that real quick. Let's assume that you had a field that was Jane Doe, right? And this represented first name, and then this represented last name. Well, that's great because it's separated by a comma. But what if in your file they actually just represented one field called name? Your CSV separator thinks that this is separating the two fields. So what happens is when they're encapsulated in quotes, and the systems will do this automatically. So if you export an Excel and there are commas inside of the fields, it will automatically encapsulate each field with quotes. It'll treat this as a single field. And that is ultimately what this is asking, that the enclosed strings are with a double quote. So it knows that those encapsulate the single field. So once you're done with that, we click next, and it will basically say, okay, I'm ready to do this. So we click next, and we wait. Boom, and it's done. Click next, and it says 841 records have been imported, and it took 3.4 seconds. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. What it is actually doing is exactly what we did with the code, to load data in file. But you just lose a little bit of control with certain things here. I should have done this. Fields terminated by that and closed by backslash double quote quote. It's got to look like that. All right. This is the same thing that we just did, except now I wrote it in the code. Okay. And if we look at the table, it should be this, you'll see that it's got the same records that were put in there. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, what if you have no idea what the fields are? Like you have absolutely no clue in terms of their the field formats or anything like that. The answer is you make everything a varchar. You literally make all of the fields var, from variable 1 through whatever you want to call them. You make them all varchar. Get them into the database. Then you can move them to another table into the appropriate format. Because if you have a 22 meg file or a 100 meg file, right? If you have something like that, that's going to be very, very difficult for you to determine what all the fields are. So you get it into the database so that you can start examining it. You're pulling in the database, in the data, raw into the database, into a table that's a temporary table, and from there, you will put it into another table with the appropriate formats. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Everybody okay with that? Is there anybody who's not? Is there anybody who doesn't care? Okay. All right. So let me show you how we can get rid of stuff from the table. What what I'm going to do is we've had this select statement, right? I may want to delete records. So I could do delete from airport table where airport equals ABQ. Again, my where clause, just like in SQL, I'm allowed to do. I can do anything I want in the where clauses. If I can do it in SQL, I can do it in, if I can do it in select, I can do it in a delete. So that being said, what I would normally do first is I will do a select statement, select star from where airport is ABQ. Hello?
You spelled airport wrong.
Did I really? Why doesn't that surprise me? It's been one of those nights. There we go. Now, what am I looking for? I am looking for, I'm trying to figure out why this stupid thing down here doesn't, why I can't see it. So let me do this. Clear. Let's run this again. Okay. How many rows did it return? 11. So I look at it and I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good result set. That's probably right. So I'm going to do delete from airport. And now what happens is I'm going to look and see how many rows it affected. And it affected 11 rows. So that's how I know that delete worked properly. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Now, I could delete from the whole table just by doing this. However, if I'm going to delete from the whole table, I'm going to give you a new command. Truncate. Truncate will basically clear the entire table, and it is faster than a delete. No rows affected. However,
Oh.
no. That was me being stupid again. Like I said, it's one of those days. 0 records return. So where delete would actually tell you how many rows were affected, the truncate gets rid of it because it reestablishes indexes. It just drops everything, and that's why it's faster. Delete has to do a little bit more work, even if you're getting rid of all the records. Okay? Does that make sense?
Then why do you have 2 separate commands for doing essentially the same thing? What's the
Because
benefit?
they're not doing the same thing. Delete will allow you to delete using a subquery. Truncate will not.
Okay.
Okay? You just could theoretically delete all the records straight using the delete command, but truncate is a better, more efficient way to do it.
Right. Okay.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Did we do the update command and insert?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm going to do those next week. Then I'm going to focus on those 2. Those are a little bit easier to do in one shot. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Now, what I would like you to do is I'm gonna ask you to import this table along with the other one. However, I'm going to do this. I'm going to jumpstart this. We're going to do an alter table. Nope, sorry. Import wizard. Because it's an import wizard. Is that Led Zeppelin? Wow. Guys aren't even laughing at my jokes tonight. Not even Chris. Is Chris on? Just not.
I don't think so.
Wow, Chris just not on. Okay, no big deal. All right, so I've got my data. I've got my data here loaded in, and I look at the rows. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to do is determine indexes. Indexes will speed up your queries. Now, I gotta clear. I don't know why. Oh, I know why. Sorry, this is why. It will speed up your queries. The thing is that you've got to determine what you want indexes on. To determine what you want indexes, you have to ask yourself, what will you query on? What will you have your subquery on? So if you're looking at this, what is the most likely set of variables or fields you will put in the where clause?
If I remember this data set, airport and year together.
Okay, so it's airport and year, right? So what I will do is in this table, I'm actually going to create an index. So what is an index? An index is like what an index is in the back of the book. It basically creates another section so that when the SQL, when your query has to look for stuff, it looks at the index and says, can I find airport and tell me all of the records where airport is ABQ. It literally creates a faster lookup. So the way we do this is we go to alter table on the new table, and I'll click on indexes. When I go to indexes, I'm going to create an index called airport index, IDX. You can call it whatever you want. Now I have to select the columns that are going to be in the index, and I'll do this one, and that's my first index. Now I might have another index for year, so I'll call year index, and that's going to be the year. However, Vihan, you just said I might want to search airport and year together, correct?
Right.
So therefore, I might create a third index that has airport, year together, and I will choose those two columns together. So now if I have a query that has a where clause that has both, is looking for airport and year in the same subquery, it combines them and looks at this index table to find all those records so it can return it faster. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Everybody else, is that good? Okay, I click apply and it will now apply those indexes. So now this is not something that you see. You're not seeing these results, for anything. However, and I don't think you're really going to notice a difference, but you won't really notice much of a difference. If I remove the indexes, we can see how long it takes. Let me do that. I need a larger data set to do this with. This was not the right data set to use. Excuse me 1 second. Alter table. I'm going to remove the indexes. We're just going to delete, delete, and delete. Apply, apply, close. Here.
So Alex, do
Yep.
you need to have a primary key?
No.
So you don't?
No, you do not need a primary key.
Okay.
However, it is a great idea to have one, and I'll create one. I'm going to show you what I would do in this case to create a primary key for this table. Okay. Notice, by the way, the query took a little bit longer without the indexes. Again, that could be something that's running on my computer because they're so close. But I can tell you that with the indexes, it would run much, much faster. I'll have to get a larger data set that we could use. Now, Vanessa basically said, should we have a primary key? Should I have a field that is a unique field? In other words, every row is unique that could be indexed. And yes, you should. It's not required, but you should have it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one in. So I've imported my data. Now I'm going to create a primary key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a field called ID. And I'm going to give it an integer. This will be a primary key, and it will be not null. It automatically does that. And I will give it an auto increment. So in other words, it will automatically create it. I'm going to move it to the top because I like my primary keys the top. They don't have to be, but I personally like them that way. I click apply.
If you're shifting it on top, would it make it on the extreme left when you do a select?
Doesn't matter now.
Okay.
Oh, well, you mean when you do like a select star? Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter where it is at all.
All right.
And you'll see that it automatically created an ID number for each one of these records. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And that helps with other things, because in this case particularly, if you do not have a primary key, you see this edit button?
Yep.
In Workbench? See, if you have a primary key, you can actually edit records in Workbench. I could change this from 1701 to 702 departures, click apply, and it will actually make that change. You cannot do that if you do not have a primary key on the table. Workbench does not allow you to edit records like that.
Okay.
Okay? Vanessa, does that answer your question?
Yep. Yep.
On the left side, you can see here that it added ID here as an integer, which is auto increment and primary key.
So here's my question then, because I use Microsoft Access.
Hold on. Oh, no. Oh, you're killing me. Go ahead.
Was that a reaction to Microsoft Access?
It's actually a reaction to Microsoft, but go ahead.
Yeah, I thought as much.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, that's what I have to use at work. So whenever you import a table, using the wizard, it always says, do you want to have the wizard
create a primary key?
Right. So then you basically do not need to have a primary key.
You don't in general with databases. Microsoft Access may require it though.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I see. Okay.
That would be very database specific.
Oh, okay.
But according to database theory, you don't need one. You'll just have multiple rows that could be the same.
Gotcha.
Okay. When you're importing data, and this is the thing that takes a lot. I mean, really a lot. You will end up with a tremendous amount of headache and problems. Okay. What I'm going to do is there is a data set that's pretty large. Let me just see if I can find it real quick. I'm going to send it. I'm going to send you the link to it because you're not really. I can't really put it on Slack. Let me just see return codes, sales records. Nope, it's not here. Okay. Oh, yes, it is. Just saw it. So it's this 2017 PubDB and so forth. I'm going to actually have you. I'm going to actually have you import a few years of data. Okay, I'm going to send you the link. This is bank loan data. What the hell is it? Okay, let's try this again. 2017. Let me see if I can find it. It's because it's not on my computer anymore. I must have trashed it. Where is it? PQ, that's not it. Here we go. Yeah, that is just going to take a while to load. Which it may. So let me open it up here. Look, that was the midterm stuff. See that?
Yeah, we're done with that.
Oh, you nut. More stuff you got there. Okay, this is what the data set looks like. Okay, there's a lot of fields here. Okay, there's a ton of fields. So I'm going to get you the links to these data sets. This is bank information. There are 20 million rows in this, and you'll import it. Okay. Now remember, if you use, especially if you're using the wizard, right? Using the wizard, you only truncate once. You don't truncate after every single one, right? Because if you do, you keep wiping it out. But the idea is to get this in there, and then what we can do is we can play with the indexes to see how good the indexes are, okay, in terms of performance.
Your text wrangler is showing it has infinite words, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it just can't calculate it. Okay?
Yeah.
And maybe this is 55,000 lines, not 20 million, or whatever it could show. Okay, 55,000 lines, and then there's going to be a few more, so you'll have a couple 100,000.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Any questions? No questions? All right.
None here.
Okay, so I'll post that link up to you, and I'll post that link up to you and then let you guys play around with importing the data. And then what I'll try and do is I'll try and see if I can get a little bit more clarity on the workbench to see why the workbench is not working for me. Okay. Oh, Chris finally joined. Wait, which Chris is that? Is that Chris P? Chris? Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the other Chris. That's okay, Chris. No worries.
Are you guys in the middle of something?
No, you're good. You're good. Stay on. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope.
All right.
Should we try the import with the wizard or with the local in file?
I would try with the local data in file. Again, it's going to depend on your the version that you have. So if you run into a problem, please let me know what version you've got and whether it's Windows, and then I'll try and set up some time and we'll go through it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
It's going to be very unique for everybody. That's the problem.
Right.
Which just gives me a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, which reminds me then, how do we check the version of MySQL? Is there a command which we can run to check?
Yeah, it should be just version. It should be show version. But if you're in Workbench, right, and you go to administration, you go to server status, it should show you the version. This is my 5.7 server, but I'm running 8. I'm running a different version of the client. So
right. I got 8.0.16. Yeah.
Right. So that's the issue. Let's see. I got 8.0 something on there. Okay. So it'll just make it. It'll make a difference as to what version you've got. What do I have? I got 8.0.15. Okay.